All right, so we now know who will have the top pick in the NHL draft. This NHL Draft Lottery went down on Monday night, and the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs continues to move on. So it's time for some hockey talk with the senior NHL writer for The Athletic and the co-host of the Puck Soup podcast. That is Sean McIndoe. Sean, how's it going?
Going. It's an interesting time right now. Boy, we got a lot of angry fans out there who didn't win the draft lottery.
You know what? They are some angry fans. I was talking with my producers about that this morning. We're going to get a little bit into that. You know, everybody wants to win. They want to get that top pick. But Chicago Blackhawks, they have the third best odds of landing the top pick in this year's draft. And they win the lottery, and they'll have the first pick. So should fans of the league be comfortable with this reward for Chicago after the Kyle Beats situation went down? Should they be comfortable with this?
Yeah, that's the question. And you saw a lot of that last night on social media and in the various comment sections and places where fans gather. And look, the NHL and the Blackhawks would say these are two completely different and separate situations. The situation that went down with Kyle Beach back in 2010 and the way that story broke a couple of years ago and the way it was handled has nothing to do with the draft lottery. It's all different people now in Chicago virtually. You know, Kyle Davidson, the GM, wasn't there in 2010. Neither was the coach. Neither were most of the key stakeholders. That the franchise has tried to move on, tried to turn the page, and that the fans should do the same. And that's fair to an extent, but it does reopen this because at the end of the day, the actions that the league took when this story broke and all the information came out, they took the actions that they felt were appropriate. Most of the rest of us felt like it was very, very light. We have seen teams be punished more severely for certainly what would seem like less serious situations. We have seen teams lose draft picks for next to nothing, for illegally or improperly handling interviews at the combine and things like that. We've seen teams lose their first round picks. The Arizona Coyotes did a few years ago. And a lot of people now today waking up to this news that Connor Bedard is presumably going to be the number one overall pick are sitting there saying, you know what? The Chicago Blackhawks shouldn't even have this draft pick because they shouldn't have had draft picks for a couple of years as a real punishment for that horrible situation that we found out about. But again, that ship has kind of sailed. The league made the decisions that they made, and we all knew coming into this season that the Hawks did have their pick, and we knew what they wanted to do with it, and now they're going to get that opportunity.
Yeah, it's still going to be a lot of angry fans for this, and they're going to view this, as I stated before, as a reward, even after everything that transpired before. So we'll see how that all plays out. Now, the Blackhawks, they are expected, as you mentioned, to select Connor Bedard with the first pick. Is he the best draft prospect since Connor McDavid?
Yeah, absolutely he is. And look, we've had some real good prospects since then. Obviously, Austin Matthews the year after, he's won an MVP. Jack Hughes right now is looking like a guy who's going to win an MVP. He was the number one pick a couple of years ago. But there's just a different tier, a different level for guys like Connor Bedard, Connor McDavid. I mean, really, if you went down the list, it's probably those two guys, Sidney Crosby, Mario Lemieux, and maybe Eric Lindros are the only guys that you would put in that category where it was just unanimous through the hockey world that these guys are complete can't miss prospects, franchise level players, where their floor looks a lot like any other first overall picks ceiling. So the expectations really couldn't be any higher for Connor Bedard. So far, there's been no indication that he can't meet them. But now reality is here, and he's got a team, and this is the roadmap ahead of him is officially in place. Now we see if he can live up to these sky-high expectations.
Yeah, you're right about living up to those sky-high expectations because all the guys you mentioned before, they definitely lived up to those expectations as can't-miss prospects. So we'll see how that plays out for Bedard, most likely in Chicago. Sean, the last week when you and I spoke, I asked you, if the Panthers were the team to beat, they now have a commanding 3-0 lead over the Leafs. They're currently the favorites to win the Cup. So I got to ask you this now again a week later. Are the Panthers the team to beat?
Yes, they are. And I'm saying that emphatically because last week I'm a Leafs fan and clearly I didn't work the reverse jinx angle hard enough. I didn't put enough pressure on the Florida Panthers last week. So I'm going to do it here. Look, the Florida Panthers are playing fantastic. The first two games against the Leafs, hey, you could make the case. Maybe the Leafs were the better team in those games, deserved a better fate in at least one of the games. But that's not how the playoffs work. I mean, the playoffs are about you win or you don't win. And the Panthers got 2 wins in Toronto, come home, play a fantastic game in Game 3. A game where not only did they get the win, but in this case, the scoreboard really flatters the Leafs. The Florida Panthers dominated what should have been a desperate team. And they're rolling right now, 6 straight wins. And look, we all know in the NHL, it's a 6-month long season. Sometimes it doesn't tell us a lot. Sometimes it's about what you do in the playoffs. Sometimes it's about just getting hot at the right time. A couple of guys are clicking. The goalie gets hot. We're seeing that in Florida. Completely legitimate. That's how the playoffs work, and they are peaking at exactly the right time. So right now, they are absolutely the favorite because they are the only one of the teams left that has that very clear open door onto round 3. Now, what's going to be interesting is once we know who those final 4 teams are, and presumably the Panthers will be one of them, do we still look at Florida as the favorite, or are we looking at a team like maybe a Carolina or an Edmonton or Vegas, maybe a Dallas? Are we looking at them and saying, okay, it was a real tough second round series. We didn't know they were going to get through, but they did. And now they're back on top as the favorites. Time will tell, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But right now, if you had to be one of these 8 teams, there's no question in anyone's mind. You want to be the Florida Panthers because you are wide open right now. All you got to do is step across the goal line into the end zone.
We'll see if they can do that. And it could change next week. We could talk next week, and somebody else could be the favorite, but we shall see. Lastly, let's keep it local here in New York and talk about the Rangers, who moved on from Gerard Gallant. The Blue Shirts, they have an older roster, as you know, not much cap flexibility heading into next season. So was moving on from Gallant the right move? And is New York an appealing spot for potential coaches here?
Yeah, I mean, whether it was the right move or not is a tough call. Gerard Gallant's a real good coach. He's had a ton of success in different places, most notably in Vegas with that expansion team that nobody thought was going to be any good. He gets them all the way to the Stanley Cup final. He's one of the better coaches out there, but he's also a veteran coach. He's an old school guy. And with a lot of coaches like that, there is a shelf life. And very often they come in and you see the impact right away. And then maybe the message starts to fall on some deaf ears. Maybe they start getting tuned out a little bit. 2 years is not a long time for a big name coach to last on a team like this. So it does feel in that sense a little bit quick, but we don't know what was being said behind closed doors. We don't know what those exit meetings with GM Chris Drury sounded like. We don't know what the voices of the players were telling him. It probably was a situation where at the very least he was going to be on a very short leash next year. So they got ahead of it a little bit and made the move now. Now, is it an attractive job? Absolutely, because this is a very good team. And typically, when you see a team make a coaching change in the NHL, it's not a good team. It's a team that is struggling. It's a team that's, it has missed the playoffs for a few years. That's where you see these openings and coaches come in and they know they've got a roster with a lot of holes in it. You look at the Rangers, I mean, first of all, big market, big fan base, great fan base, all of those things, those are going to appeal to a certain type of coach. But you're also looking at a team that's been in the playoffs twice in a row, 100-plus points, won a couple of rounds last year, and you're saying, man, I've got a real good roster to work with here. I can have success right out of the gate. I can contend for a Stanley Cup right out of the gate, which you're obviously not going to do someplace like an Anaheim or Columbus where there are openings right now. Now, the flip side of that is the fact that this job is open after a couple of 100-point seasons tells you that the expectations are high. And this is not a job where you're going to be able to come in and sell the GM and the media and the fans on, hey, let's be patient. It's going to take me 3 or 4 years to get everything clicking. You're going to be expected to have success right away. But if you're a coach who's got that confidence, who says, you know what, I can come in and I can get these guys going in the right direction. This is absolutely a Stanley Cup caliber roster right now. Not a ton of cap flexibility, not a ton of prospects on the way, but some youth on the roster that Gerard Gallant was not able to click with. If you can come in and do it and wake those guys up, get the talent going, this is a situation where you could have a lot of success real quick.
Can be very attractive. Will be interesting to see who succeeds Gallant as the next head coach of the New York Rangers. We talked everything here. We talked about the playoffs. We talked about the draft lottery. Always good to talk about that stuff with Sean McIndoe. Sean, I hope things can get better for your Maple Leafs. I hope so, because they're down 3-0 now. When I check in with you again, I'm hoping things are a little bit better, at least for your sake.
I appreciate the sentiment, man, but the words hope and the words Maple Leafs don't live in the same sentence very often. So we'll see what we can do.
I can understand that, along with some teams that I root for. I can understand that. Great job as always. Thank you, Sean.
Right on. Thanks for having me.